StephTherapy911 presents Stephanie Samuels. Straight Talk. Join us every Sunday at 7 p.m. live Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live. It's real, raw, uncensored. And now, here's your host, Stephanie Samuels. Stop the stigma.
Hello, we are live on Straight Talk with Stephanie Samuels, and today we have got Cassey Amburn, and this is just one of the weeks where there's lots of anxiety going on and energy and a subject that is always difficult to talk about. So, suicide is probably the most difficult topic. It's one of those incredible taboos that people just have a lot of anxiety about. And I'm going to give you Cassey's background. I had asked her to send it, but then I'm going to give you Cassey and my background together, which is kind of interesting and unique and typical Steph shit, So, and probably typical Cassey shit too.
I like it.
Yeah. So Cassey, after graduating from high school, she worked in her local school district as a teacher's assistant, and she decided that she wanted to change jobs and explore a job in the city of Bedford, which is down in Texas. So she began working for the Bedford Police Department in June of 2006 as a 911 dispatcher. Warren, her husband, and she met pretty quickly after she started at the police department. He was a patrol officer at the time. Warren and Cassey were married in 2008 and welcomed their son Warren the fourth that same year. Just like any other couple, they had their ups and downs in their marriage. Warren was very dedicated to the job and to his family, although the family ended up taking a backseat to that job. After 15 years with the police department, Warren made a career change and became a federal agent with the DEA. Their lives changed a lot with the new job, but they fought through the crazy times and kept going. She always knew that Warren put the job first, so therefore she didn't see the changes in his behavior as quickly as she felt that she should have. The job took a toll on him. At the end of the day, Warren just wanted to put the bad guy in jail, but it was never enough. He just couldn't catch them fast enough, and he knew that. They miss him daily. They miss seeing his smile when he was happy. Warren thought that taking his own life and leaving Warren IV and Cassey without him here was the best thing that he could do for them. They never got to say goodbye. So I had gotten this phone call. I'm obviously going to let Cassey, talk quite openly, and I'm going to want to field questions today because Cassey is just one of the most open women that anybody that's listening is going to be able to ask questions that you wouldn't necessarily ask anybody else or be comfortable with. So I had gotten a phone call at my office from a DEA agent for Copline, and he had said that one of their agents had died by suicide, and the family wanted to do in lieu of flowers to make a donation to an organization that was kind of boots on the ground, hands-on in dealing with law enforcement and the stressors that they were going through, not just suicidal, but all the stuff leading up to it. So anyway, once he had decided that we were a pretty good fit, he and I had some conversations. Well, I don't believe in coincidences. So as it turned out, Copline was going to be doing its next training down in Grand Prairie, which is about 15, 20 minutes away from where Cassey was. So I had requested being able to meet she and the family to thank them for the donation. And I felt that it was important to put a face to the name to Copline. So I was able to meet Cassey and Donna and Warren, her in-laws, and her sister-in-law, Kimberly. And we met at, I think it was the fire department, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was just one of those awkward moments because you just don't know they have no idea what they're going to see in me or who this person is behind this Copline thing. And, I am expecting just, a whole epic shit show of, oh my God, what the hell, and tremendous anxiety of what do I say? I'm sorry for your loss is just empty words.
They are.
And I just could not have felt more welcomed. Just a warmer group of people. And I remember, Donna, I remember your mother-in-law, like she had asked me how I had founded Copline and gave her this whole story. And she's like, you don't have anybody that killed themselves. I'm like, no. She's like, you don't have anybody in law enforcement? I'm like, no. She's like, that's amazing. Like she would have never thought of that. So it was just kind of interesting. But at the end of what was really hours of spending time together, it was really clear that while Copline was doing training, and that although we deal with all different levels of stressors and we train, training is brutal. It's just an emotionally charged training that as the days go by, we continue to escalate role plays and techniques. And the last day is the most difficult. It is the most lethal of the calls. And yet, having met Cassey, I just thought this was just this great marriage to be able to bring her in. Like there has to be a reason why I'm here, she's here. And although it was just 2 weeks after Warren had taken his life, I remember going back to my lead trainer. So I said to Cassey, I'm like, would you mind, coming in to do this? And she's like, no, I'm not a public speaker, but I'll do my best. And by the way, she's a rock star and public speaker. So
I'll tell my chief.
So I'm going to tell your chief. So anyway, 2 weeks later, there she was. Just amazing. I remember our lead trainer pulling me aside and he's like, okay, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Like she's amazing. So anytime we're down there, Cassey is just tremendous at being able to talk to Copline, to be able to continue her vigilance in suicide prevention, suicide awareness. She works with Blue Help, which is another amazing organization. So today was just really important. It's important that we're able to talk about some of the stigmas behind it, kind of looking at the world and what was missed and what wasn't missed. And, Cassey and I have talked about just the grieving parts of it and how people grieve differently and the family members grieve differently. And she and I were addressing how she, God willing, will never know what it's like to be a mother who grieves the loss of a child, or a, sibling of somebody. I mean, those are just the different, or a child. I mean, so that those are the components that, when we were talking, she said, I can tell you what, as a spouse, this feels like, but I certainly can't kind of tell you anything else. And, last week we addressed with Dawn Stevens, the line of duty death and kind of the pressure that's put on one there. And yet the stigma that goes along when you tell somebody that your loved one died from suicide. So anyway, I'm gonna let you kind of go, and when I have questions or whatever, or anybody else has answers, please, or questions, please, go ahead and ask us. Go ahead.
So it is kind of one of those topics that nobody wants to talk about, and it is a topic that unfortunately I do know, and it's not something you obviously ever wish upon anybody. And I think the reason that I choose to be so open about it is because it is our reality and it is our life. And in my opinion, the more you hide behind it, then I can't help somebody else. And I don't know that I'll ever help anybody else. I don't know that our story will ever, be the one that makes somebody make a call or get help or see something different. But I would hope that just the more people that are open and choose to talk about it and accept that it is a real thing, that maybe we can help at least somebody out there, and they'll understand they're not alone. I've reached out to countless widows that I've seen on Facebook or through websites that have just lost their husbands, and I try to share as much information as I can with them as far as resources for them and their family, just because I know what it's like to have that happen, and you don't know where to turn, you don't know what to say or do. So I try to be somebody that they can reach out to should they need it.
So when you have looked back and we talked about, in my brief introduction, kind of how Warren went from local policing to federal policing. What had you noticed as far as changes went, probably in retrospect as well as while they were going on?
I think the biggest difference when Warren decided to switch careers and he got on with DEA, it wasn't excitement that he was very excited to move to a different, I don't want to say it was a different type of job, but still, police work, if you will. And he was excited for that. And we got to stay in Dallas and we got to stay local with family. And so at first there wasn't any significant difference for him. I thought he was happier. I thought it was a different group of people and life was going to be grand. And I would say probably about 2.5 years into it is when I started noticing just the stress of things. The cases got bigger. He was able to promote a little faster than he had thought, which was a good thing. Meant he was doing a great job. But the level of anxiety and stress and lack of sleep and the constant worrying about cases and the workload and all that is when I started noticing just a difference in him. He was more tired. He was more reserved. He, didn't go out of his way to join us at things. And so at first you don't see it and you just kind of give him some space and you know that this is going to take some time.
Tell me about tired and sleeping, because that's always been a big one with law enforcement and exacerbates kind of all other symptoms.
He had a lot of trouble sleeping. He would, to say he had a normal schedule, you can't say that. Even though it was a 9-to-5 job, it wasn't really 9-to-5. So they, they'd be out long nights. They'd have to get up at 2, 3 in the morning to go do something, or stay out till 1 or 2 and come home and be up the next day. So Warren he didn't sleep. He could not ever shut his mind down, no matter what he did, no matter how many melatonin he took, or whether it was Lunesta or Ambien. His mind never shut down. And so it became to where he would literally get 1, 2, maybe 3 hours of sleep, and that's what he would run on for days.
So you talked about Lunesta or Ambien. Both of those needed to be prescribed. So was he willing to see a doctor? Did he doctor shop? Like, what was his kind of maybe hypervigilance in that, or even talking to somebody?
So we had a doctor. I still see this doctor, but he was a doctor that we had been with for years, and he had much respect for Warren and the job that Warren did. And I think he understood Warren and understood how Warren's mind worked. And so he did have Warren on Ambien. And then he would also prescribe him Xanax to help bring down the anxiety and just to help Warren's mind calm down. There just came a point in time where that just didn't work for Warren. And he started having other health problems, and he would seek, help for those, but he never wanted to steer away from the doctor that knew him so well, because he knew that he could continue to take these medicines in hopes that they would help. He could continue to take these medicines, but they just didn't. It came a point where his body was too used to them, and the stress became too much. So he never shut it down.
What were some of the other medical stuff going on with him? Had he been injured on the job, or?
No, he had not been injured on the job. He started having some stomach issues, and we went in and he had like an endoscopy done and a couple other tests done. We found out that he had a thyroid disease. And so we started to try to get help for those things, but the stress of the body just wasn't responding to anything. And so he had put on weight from the thyroid disease, couldn't get the weight off. So he just slowly, his body just slowly started to just resist everything. And so between, I think, the lack of sleep, the medication, some depression, I mean, it just started spiraling downhill.
Did you ask him to start to talk to somebody?
I did, and Warren had tried a couple of times. It always seemed to get to the same point, though. He would talk to a counselor, and then I think he would get to a point with a counselor where the real stuff would have to come out, and that's when he was shut down and he'd quit counseling. I only know of 2 counselors that he went to. I found out later that he had tried another one. After he passed away, I found out from somebody that he had tried another one, but he just couldn't get to the point that he was asking for real help. His fear was, if somebody finds out that I need real help, I'll lose my job.
So did he get help through the DEA? Did he find culturally competent therapists outside the DEA? Don't know, kind of give me the lay of the land.
The first time he went through EAP, which was, so he went through my work, EAP, and found a counselor, and she, you know, he didn't like her, tried a couple of sessions with her, but she wasn't able to just get it out of him. Second counselor, he did find through a friend that she helps with local police departments with, I think, mental health and whatnot. And so she had recommended a counselor, and she was great for Warren. But again, once it got to the serious talk and things that were really going on, he shut down and told me that she said he was fine and released and he didn't have to go back. He refused to let DEA know there was an issue at all, and would not ask them for help at all.
So had he talked about suicide before? Kind of when did you realize that the depths of the depression were pretty significant?
He had talked about suicide before, and I think that's shocking for some people. And unfortunately for me, I hate to say it, it wasn't shocking each time he talked about it, because it's not that you get used to that talk, but that I hoped that by him talking about it, that was his way of talking himself out of it. So I would say about 3 or 4 times before he actually took his own life, he had talked about suicide. He had a plan. He knew exactly how he would do it and where he would do it, who would be the one to notify me. On a Christmas Eve of 2017, I believe it was, it might have been 2018, they run together now. He came out of his room and he was in a bad place, and he had held a gun to his head and told me that he was done. He couldn't do it anymore. And so at that moment, I just stood there. And I had hoped that staring me in the face would be enough for him to not pull the trigger. And he didn't. He put the gun down and went back to his room. But it's moments like that where you don't know what to do, and you know he's serious. And so I would say about 2 years prior to him actually taking his life was when I knew something was terribly wrong. The not sleeping, the not coming home all the time. He started drinking. I didn't realize how bad the drinking had gotten. And, you know, at some point you try to help him and you try to fix it and to save them. But there gets to a point where there's nothing more you can do. And you just watch them.
So the day he killed himself, anything for you that you look back on and say, Jesus, you know, now I see it, or average day?
Yes. The night before he took his own life, he stood we were talking in one of the bedrooms, and unfortunately we were going through a divorce. We had decided that the marriage was no longer going to work. I had also decided that I had done everything I could do. We have a son that was seeing and hearing everything. And so I thought the best thing to do was to separate and to let him figure things out on his own. So the night before he passed away, he stood in my room and he kept begging me to just, please don't divorce me. Please don't divorce me. Let's try to figure this out. And I told him, I said, it's not about the divorcing. It's about you maybe just need time without me to figure out what's going on. And so that night, looking back now, I feel like he had a plan that night. And I feel like the next day I got up, I went to work. I had a great day at work, actually. And it was kind of one of those where we didn't talk the next day, but that wasn't uncommon. You know, when things were kind of tough, we kind of give each other space. And so when I got the text message from him that told me what he was about to do, I don't want to say I didn't believe him, but I didn't. We had conversations about suicide before. And so I almost looked at it and I thought, here we go. All right, I'm going to run home. I got to talk to him, figure out what's going on. I'll be back. But that he was gone at that point.
So did you do that? So did you leave and go?
I did not. So working for the fire department in the same city that we work for, I have a radio on, so we hear all the radio traffic. So at that point, the police department was already at my house, and my chiefs left and headed over to the house as well. And so
How did they know what had happened, Cassey?
My chief walked into my office, and I kind of started to panic when I realized I started reading more of his message over and over, and there were details in it, and then there were pictures. He sent pictures of the gun on the bathroom floor, and then he sent a picture of a goodbye letter, basically, that was taped to the garage door. And it pretty much told the cops where to find him, that there was a gunshot wound to the back of the head, and he told me to not come in and find him. And he left a message for our son that said he will love him for forever and be a better man than him. So at that point, I realized this was real. And so I had my chief read the text message, and they all agreed that I should stay at work and they would go and see what they could find out. And at that point, we started hearing things on the radio that they were at my house, they were going to make entry. And I heard the whole thing. And having worked in dispatch, you know what to listen to and what to listen for. And so they kept trying to turn off my radio. And I just remember telling them that I had to hear the word signal 12, because for us, that means, you know, somebody's passed away. And so I had to hear those words, because if I didn't hear that, then it wasn't real. And it felt like forever for them to say it, but it really wasn't. It was about 15, 20 minutes by the time they got there and made the call. So I stayed at my office, and I don't remember too much about that day after that. I remember a lot of people coming to the fire station. So.
Did you ever go into the house to see that the scene had already been cleaned up? At what point in time, you know, kind of how did you navigate that course at that point?
We were not allowed back into the house for, I believe it was about 48 hours. We were told we couldn't go back to the house. So we stayed with some amazing friends. I literally was going to go to a hotel that night. I think I was just in such shock that I said, we'll just go stay at a hotel. It's fine. And everybody around me knew that wasn't fine. So we stayed with some of our amazing friends, Andrew and Morgan. And about 2 days later, we were allowed to go back to the house, and they had already, the people that I work with had helped have a hazmat team come and clean up. He took his own life in our master shower. And so that was cleaned up for us before we got there. They did have to break the door, the laundry room door. The framing was messed up, so they had that fixed for me. And so we were able to go back into the home. I believe it happened on a Monday. And so I believe on Wednesday we got to go back to the house. And I had to go back to get documents and gather things for DEA that they needed, and also the funeral home.
What do you remember now? How old was your son, Warren the Fourth?
He had just turned 10. Wait, yes, sorry. He had just turned, isn't that bad? I think he had just turned 11.
Because he's now
February, so 11, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's now wretched 12, as you have said.
Yes.
What did he understand And who told him?
So we had him, he was at gymnastics when it happened, and then he went down to a friend's house, some of the friends in a cul-de-sac down the street from us. And so I asked them to bring him up to the station, to the fire station, once we kind of had a little bit more information. And so we had 2 DEA agents that were assigned to us that were part of the trauma team, and they were amazing. And so when they brought Warren the fourth up to us, my father-in-law, myself, and the 2 DEA agents took him in my office. And we didn't tell him the details. All we told him was that his dad had passed away and that he just was sick. And we didn't have much more information at the time. He, of course, shocked. He didn't cry. I think he was just very confused at the time. Later, we were able to tell him once DEA brought a counselor down, and he sat in the room and helped me tell Warren the truth about what had happened. And he understands more now, being 12, than he did, I think, at the time. And so he understands what his dad did, and he knows.
So how soon did you move out of the house?
I never stayed there again. I tried. I loved that house, and I had the option to stay. But I'll be honest, as weird as this is going to sound, it wasn't necessarily about what he did in the house. I was able to go back into the master bedroom and into the master bathroom, and I didn't look at that shower and see a bloody mess, even though I never saw him in the shower. I didn't picture it like that. I think it was more for me just the sadness of the home, because the last year and a half was so sad with him. And so being in that home just brought sadness to me, because things just weren't good, and they weren't happy, and I wanted to live in a home where it was happy. And we loved our home. Our neighbors were amazing. I was so sad to leave that neighborhood, but I think it was better for Warren and I to start fresh somewhere else.
How quickly was house sold and kind of all of that? Because everybody always judges. There's always that great, hey, you moved on too fast, too slow, to this, to that. Why didn't you say? So kind of what was that? Because I remember how excited you were, honestly, to kind of, get a new place and kind of start a different life. I don't think there's a new life. I think that's just a nice bullshit term, but I think it's
right. It's different. It's not a new life.
Do-over. You don't
get a do-over, and you don't just get to erase it, right? So
Exactly.
we tried through counseling. We had suggestions of how to be at the house. I will say that little man, he wanted to stay. He didn't want to leave. He had turned his dad's master bedroom into a man cave, and he was just going, big television, his little beanbag chairs, his PlayStation, all that. He had moved it all. And I obviously struggled way more than he did with it. And I think it was after a lot of counseling and a lot of trying to be there, I just decided that I had already, in my head, we were going to move forward. And so I looked for places to live. We were still staying with our amazing friends, Andrew and Morgan, who I joke with them all the time. They invited us to sleep at their house that one night, and it turned into like 3.5 months.
They can leave from Saturday Night Live.
I slowly would nope, and I would start hiding, bringing stuff into their house. Morgan would always check to see if Andrew was looking, and I would bring televisions, bags. If I could have gotten a dresser up there, I would have. But they were amazing for us, and they were so good for us. And then we decided that we needed to find our own place. So we gave them a break and moved in with my cousins here in Bedford. And I had looked for a house and I couldn't find one, and decided we would just settle for an apartment. And then some friends that Warren had played soccer with their son for years, they just by chance were moving 2 houses down from their current house, and they were going to rent this house out. And so I called them and I said, what are the chances you would rent to me? And it was a done deal. And I do feel like it was it was a God thing that I was able to move into this house when we did. The people that we live in the neighborhood with and in our cul-de-sac have become some of our best friends. And I couldn't have asked for a better situation.
How did
So that was in September. So it's a year. We've been in the house a year now. So
wow. How do people react when, so now you're kind of, you're talking, you're doing whatever, and now people say, they obviously see you're alone or what have you, and they ask you about your husband or whatever. How does that go?
it's interesting to watch people, and I don't want to say I wish I could record people's reaction, but sometimes I do. It's Warren has started junior high, and he's got a new group of friends, and so I'm starting to meet new parents. And so there is the question of, are you married? Is she divorced? Is she, what is she? I don't tell people I'm divorced, because I'm not divorced. I'm a widow, even though that word sounds so old, but I get it. And so it is kind of one of those, when you tell people that, my husband passed away, you would think people would stop there, and they don't. A lot of people say I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'll tell you, I'm the worst person to say that to, because my reaction back to you is, it's okay. Because I don't know what to say back to you. Like, it's not okay, but it's my reality. And my friends keep telling me, you've got to just say thank you. And I just say, well, that seems like they gave me something. So I'm the worst widow there is, I think, when it comes to accepting people's, words of, whatever. But when you tell people that you're a widow and that, your husband's passed away, some ask how. And I just say, well, unfortunately, he took his own life. He was in law enforcement, and he took his own life. And the looks on their faces, it's shocking. At that point, they don't know what to say and what to do. And I very quickly follow it up with, it's okay. I'm very open about it. My son is open about it. We don't hide from it. We talk about it. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask me. I know that's shocking for people to hear.
What about the blaming? When there's a suicide, the one thing that I see is we want to play the blame game more than any other type of death. It's almost like the discomfort's so great. I know when I debrief, for fatal motor vehicle accidents, whatever else, I always say, I don't think I'm a great therapist. I think I ask great questions. But the reason why is because what I'm doing in my head is I'm trying to package things, put them in that nice, neat package, put the bow on it, stick it in the drawer, and go, okay, good. As long as it's nice and neat and tidy, and it's never going to happen to me. So there you go. So I blame's very similar, is we want to. Accidents are brutal. When you don't get to blame somebody, we want to be able to blame the person that was driving too quickly. We want to be able to blame a drunk. We want to be able to blame anything or anyone so that we can feel better, so we can desperately make sense of the senseless. And when you don't get to make sense of the senseless, you're just left feeling empty, frustrated, shitty, just all these adjectives. I'm not sure shitty is an adjective. It is now.
I like it.
It's good. But that's part of it. So now you're the widow, you're young, you're attractive. Like I remember, going to meet the widow, and I'm like, holy crap, as you said, you're this young woman. And that even though you were going through a divorce, you weren't divorced, that he chose to die while he was still married to you. And I think in some ways you honor him by that, by being the widow, and not quickly saying to people, well, I was going to be divorcing him anyway, that you've really kind of owned that relationship and his wishes to die with you being his wife. And yet I can imagine for other people, it would be like, well, what did she do to him? Like, what would cause somebody, so young, to die? And that's where it's just so painful and baffling, because as you said, when I read your statement and stuff, that he really believed that he was doing you and Warren, your son, a favor, kind of by not being here. And people don't understand that when people are going to die by suicide, that they're not really thinking clearly from an outsider's perspective. From their own perspective, they are thinking completely clearly. I have a suicide note of a patient of mine that died by suicide about 9 months after he was out of session with me. And I was mentioned in there. And in there he said, I know you're thinking that I'm not thinking clearly. And I was like, oh, and he kind of went through it, and and God willing, it'll be some years from now, but I'm looking forward to debating him once again on the thinking clearly about it.
Right.
So I just wanted to kind of touch base, because that's such a huge part of it, that blame game, that because you're so open about the suicide, you do open yourself up to the vulnerability of people looking at you. When Dawn was on, and you've got, those sad puppy eyes of, the line of duty death widow, you get, I'm sure those eyes, as well as what did you do, bitch? So if you want to kind of.
The blame that's real. It's very real. And I think that is something that I have probably struggled the most with from people, is immediately following Warren's death, I was blamed for his suicide. Warren left letters. He left, he had texted about 30 to 40 people the night before and had said some pretty awful things about me. And the day of his death, he had also texted quite a few people. And so I think the biggest mistake people make when they're blaming somebody is to put somebody else's death on a human being is probably one of the most hurtful. I don't even know that I have the words to say, but there were people who walked up to me the day after, 2-3 days later, and said, we know you're the reason that he took his life. We know what you did. We know how you treated him. We know why you were divorcing him. And the things that people believed about me, I think, were so hurtful, because I don't deny that the reason that Warren told people things about me, that not all of it was false or true. I've owned everything that I've done in our marriage. Everybody knew that. And for Warren to put it out there that I was the reason he took his life and people believed it, I have no words. I don't. And I've struggled with that for a very long time, of what people believe of me and think of me. But there also came a point where I had to realize that if you knew anything about Warren and you had watched any part of his life the last year, you would have known that I was not the reason he took his life. I don't have that much power over somebody.
And and kind of, what we, task our children and other people with is taking responsibility for your own actions. And that there are horrible marriages, horrible relationships, and whatever else, and people get divorced and they move on. They don't die by suicide. So whether true, unfounded, it doesn't make a difference. I think it's just trying to deal with pain and wanting to assign value. And I don't think that people really sit back and think about what this does to you, what this does to your son, and that you've had a hard time to have a husband who chose to die rather than deal with the unraveling of a marriage or what have you. And we'll never know what the future would have been. We will never known if he would have gotten the right help, if he would have ended up, a year, 2 years from now in marriage counseling and kind of being able to reconnect and understand different things.
Mhm.
You know, I know that you were, one of the things that I so desperately wanted for you was to get into counseling. That was just one of the things that, when we met, I know that we had addressed,
Mhm.
and it was just so incredible to hear that the DEA had taken great care of you, made sure that you had a therapist.
Mhm.
And I remember saying to you, how often are you talking to, the person? You're like, every day. I'm like,
Every
I was like, I'm good. I'm good.
I
Like,
still I still talk to him. I talk to him twice a week. And he's my saving grace. And it's funny because it's not even always about Warren. We don't always talk about Warren. We talk about life. We talk about me being a single mom. We talk about the responsibilities of that and how our life is different and the everyday challenges and so it's DEA could not have been any better to me and my son during that whole time. I mean, I do remember when I met the counselor for the first time, I was a bitch to him. I looked at him and I said, what is it that you need me to say so that I can get out of this and I can go about my way? And good thing that he's good at his job, because here I am 16, 17 months later and I still talk to him. And I didn't think I needed help. I thought, let me just get through all this and then I'll come back and deal with it. But
and
that's
that's so important, and that's a tribute not only to you, but clearly at first to a therapist. I know for me, one of the things that is my job is that when a person first comes in, particularly after experiencing a traumatic event, it's my job to honestly think for them and help them make the best decisions for them, not tell them what to do. But I know when it's 2:11 in the morning and I call 911 because I'm going through something, I'm not thinking clearly. They are coming into my home and they are going to make decisions based on their experience, their expertise, and what have you. And they're going to make sure that I am okay. Whatever the okay is going to be, they are going to make sure I am okay. And that's kind of how I view my own job, is that it's my job to make sure that whoever comes in is okay. And if that requires 5 days a week, 7 days a week, they're going to get what it is that they need. But to make that connection, and I will always say this, why people start in therapy with me is not why they end up staying. So the initial issue, which
right.
is here,
Mm-hmm.
is normally kind of that tip of an iceberg. And when you feel safe and comfortable, you can start going underneath that iceberg.
There's so many more layers you had no idea were there.
And then to boot, you still have the shit that's going on in your day-to-day life, let alone the crap that was underneath.
Right.
So you and I were talking about, what it's like now to have a 12-year-old son who has no use for anybody, whether it's
Nobody.
you, whether it's grandparents or whomever. Like, he is just kind of
He's rogue.
rogue 12-year-old. And he's angry. And, and
He
I know
is.
he's still in counseling, which is wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful to have a mom that believes in counseling and is going to help facilitate. Like, he can act out, he can do all his shit, but you've got somebody you can pick up a phone saying, hey,
Yeah.
12-year-old, here's what's going on and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, the last training, I think, was just before the year anniversary date of Warren's death. And I remember you coming in, you're like, he's the death of me. It's just, and when you spoke to the guys in Grand Prairie for that round, it was just, kind of dealing with this next phase. And,
It's tough.
yeah. So if you want to kind of address that and, what it's like now to be a single parent, but truly a single parent, not worrying about, every other weekends and, and
Right.
I hate doing this and dragging him here. It's truly now single parenting. So,
And I think that's one thing that I would not be where I'm at today without my village of people. and I will do them a favor and not name them all on here because they'd probably kill me. But I have the best village and the best group of friends I could have ever asked for. And being a single mom, and like you said, a true single mom, it is difficult because I don't have the every other weekend when I'm free. And granted, I have a 12-year-old. He can stay by himself. I can leave him for all day. I mean, once COVID hit, I didn't get to work from home. I've been working in the office
Okay.
every day. So my child, unfortunately, has been home alone for 6 months. And so it is different, and you don't get those breaks, and you don't, you just, there's moments that you do just say, fuck it, I'm done. Like I want to tap out. Like I want to say, tonight's your night to do, tonight's your night to deal with him. And I don't have that. And I love my child with obviously everything I have, and he is my everything. But as a mom, I do have the mom guilt that sometimes I'm I'm I don't have it in me. And raising a 12-year-old boy who understands what his dad did, who doesn't have a dad, and it does crush him to see his friends that have dads that are involved. It's tough for him, and I'm the only one he has to take his anger out on.
Tell me what's been discussed as far as, does he want you to date? Does he want you to remarry? What are your thoughts on remarrying a law enforcement officer or a civilian or what have you? I mean, strong opinions after going through, what you've been through, again, what Dawn had been through. I mean, just whole can of worms.
It is, and we've talked about the dating. We're 16, 17 months past, and I did tell him at some point, I'd get back into the dating world, dating game. At 39, it's a little different than it was when I was in my 20s. Very, very different. But he, that makes him nervous. He's afraid somebody's going to come in and take my attention away from him. And he's afraid that he's going to not bond with the person that I want to spend time with. And I think it brings comfort to him to know that right now I've decided to focus on him and to focus on this phase and stuff that he's going through. And so I try to bring as much comfort to him as I can when it comes to changes in my life. But at the same time, you miss having a companion. You miss having somebody to come home to and talk to and share your day with. And so it's a weird place to be in. And I don't know what the right answer is or when the right time is. And I think it's, for everybody, it's different. It's whenever you feel like you're ready and your life is, I have to know that my life and his life are stable enough to bring somebody into that. And I think that right now, with what he's going through and what he's dealing with, it's very tough for him. And I don't think it's fair to bring somebody into that right now when I'm trying to help him get through some things that are pretty serious for him.
What are the thoughts on you dating somebody in law enforcement?
It's all I know. It's they tell me at work I don't have a poker face, so I can't hide my face.
I am certainly not taking you to a casino, just so you know.
The mask doesn't help either. When we have to wear masks, as my eyes say it all as well. It's all I know. And prior to Warren, I dated law enforcement. So it seems to be what I'm more attracted to. And it's not necessarily uniform. I don't know if it's the personality, if it's the type, I don't know what it is, but I do think it'd be nice to find somebody that has a normal job, like 8 to 5, that you're not having to deal with shift work or, the stresses that come with that job. But I also know that stresses come with any job. And so I know that, no matter what job somebody has, you can battle stress and you can battle anything. So I'd like to find something different than law enforcement, but it's all I know.
So now you walk in that unique path because you're also far more educated than most. So we've heard different stats for how many officers have PTSD. I'm not even going to, take stabs any longer. It's high.
Mhm.
But you now have a wealth of knowledge. I assume that you'd see red flags differently.
I do.
I assume that you would potentially address them differently.
Mhm.
So now let's say you end up meeting somebody in law enforcement. Where does the discussions for post-traumatic stress disorder, for the critical incidents they're involved in, for their beliefs in counseling, for their thoughts on medication, kind of all this stuff that you hear us, us cop shrinks talking about, and really kind of people just that are intimately involved in the law enforcement community, that this has really been the talk for years now about mental health, mental wellness, resiliency, seeking help.
Mhm.
So kind of, how do you walk in with your eyes wide open and a different level of communication?
I do think that that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of hesitant to get back out in the dating world, if we're being honest, is because I don't know that I trust, things like I used to, or that I'm not going to sabotage a relationship because I see things differently now. And so, should
Sabotage how?
do it.
Sabotage how?
Um, Now maybe being overly, concerned, or see the red flags quickly, or, picking, pointing something out to somebody and they don't see it, but me being adamant that it's there just because I watched it. I lived through it for so long with Warren. And so I do know what to look for. And that's not to say that I know everything. I know every red flag. I mean, I only know what I lived through, but I do see things differently now. And so I encourage counseling. I encourage counseling for everybody. I think it's one of the greatest things in the world. I think everybody needs a therapist. But I, I think that you've got to be able, somebody that I want to become close with in a relationship has to be able to acknowledge that we're not all perfect and we can't all fix our own problems. Sometimes it's above us and beyond our control. And if you're willing to at least accept that, and you're willing to know that help is out there for whatever you're going through, whether it's job related, personal related, whatever, you seeking help, it's okay. And too many people out there j- don't believe it, and they don't agree with it. And in the police world, unfortunately, it's, they take it and they just push it down further and further until it's too far and they
Yeah,
can't turn back.
the tagline's been, it's okay not to be okay. But in law enforcement, you're right. It is, the stigma still exists, which is just brutal. These shows every week, part of it is truly to try and make a difference. Is
Hmm.
that one person that hears that a share goes on, somebody shares it and says, hey, and they can relate to you, Cassey. And it, that's what it's about, because that stigma is absolutely alive and well. And I can't even tell you that it's bullshit, because there are still some agencies that, should you seek help, just will view it as, holy crap, they need to have a fitness for duty. There's an issue going on, rather than being able to sit back and say, what people see on the streets, this job is
It's
not
real.
normal.
Right. It's not.
I mean, if you can see the evils of the world, I mean, and that's to be able to describe to somebody, I, I imagine horrible shit, but I still know, because I'm truly not evil, I haven't imagined everything, because I'm
Right.
not wired for that level of evil.
Hmm.
And yet these men and women that wear a badge and uniform are tasked not only to deal with that level of evil, but then to not react,
Hmm.
and then to go home,
And shut it off.
yeah,
Hmm.
and to reconnect
Just.
like nothing
Hmm.
happens.
Hmm.
Who the hell can do? that's actually not literally psychotic.
Right. No, it is tough. And I do think that that's when I noticed that Warren used to be good at that. He used to be good at coming home and shutting it down to an extent. You still knew it bothered him. And I think that was a huge red flag for me, knowing something was really wrong with him, because there came a point where he would come home and go into great detail. We always had great communication about cases he was working and whatnot. We really did. And so that I wasn't the wife that didn't know the type of cases he was on or what he was working. I always knew. But when I knew something was really wrong and he wasn't able to process it anymore, was he came home one day and pulled up his laptop and showed me a video of some surveillance that they had been watching, and it was graphic. And I asked him, I said, okay, I've seen enough, shut the laptop down. And he said, no, let's show our son, let's show Warren so he can see what drugs do to people. And at that point I knew we're not in a good place anymore. He's willing to show our son a video that he can't see this, and Warren just, it wasn't a thing for him. He wanted us to see what he was dealing with. And that video literally played over and over in his mind. Matter of fact, the day he passed away, when we were able to go back in the home, we found all the CDs of the murder cases that he had worked laying on the desk, and he had watched them all that day that he died. He sat there and went through all of the interviews and the pictures and everything. And so it never left his mind, ever.
In retrospect, do you wish that you could have forced him to be in treatment or what have you?
I should have, looking back now, I should have probably contacted DEA on my own. Warren kept telling me that I can't, I'll lose my job. I'll lose my job. If you can't, I can't tell them, you can't tell them. And I remember standing in my office about 4 or 5 days after he had passed away, and I was talking to the 2 agents that had been assigned to us from DEA, and they were going over some details of some things. And I just remember yelling at both of them and saying, why didn't you guys offer him help? Why would he have been fired had he have come to you? And the looks on their faces, they were devastated. And they said, Cassey, that wouldn't have been the case. Had he have come to us, we would have done everything we could have to not only keep his job, but to get him the exact help he needed. But he was too proud, and that wasn't a thing for him. And so I just remember I felt awful because DEA would have supported him. And they were amazing to me and my entire family through the whole thing. So the help is out there. You just have to find the right person to talk to.
What would you say, kind of in closing, what would you say to an officer that's watching this show right now, that's thinking of killing himself?
God, you talked about how they're not necessarily in their right mind, right, when they do it. And I think the only thing I could say to somebody is to just take a step back, just reach out to a friend, reach out, go for a walk, do something to take a step back. Because if you've got a family, a wife and a kid, leaving us behind is not the answer. Leaving me here to raise our son by myself is not the answer. I know in Warren's mind, he thought it was, but I would give anything in the world to have him back and to have him, whether we were divorced or not, to be happy and healthy. And so leaving your friends and family behind, we're worse off without you. And you're loved and you're cared for, and the help is there. And I would have fought hard, as well as Warren's friends and family would have fought hard to get him what he needed. We just didn't know how bad it was. And so you are loved, and you are so much more important than you can ever imagine.
Thank you. There is nothing that I can add to that. It is such an amazing journey that you have chosen to allow all of us to be on with you, and including me. And I always feel so honored. And I remember, when I wanted to do a show with a survivor, I mean, it was you. It was just, kind of thinking about you and your openness and your honesty and your realness. And I know that, the comments have just reflected how much everybody loves you, and how appreciative they are of you being able to do this. So I
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I look forward to continued conversations.
Yes.
And for you being part of our lives, our Cop Line, and in the world that is really dealing with what has become an epidemic. So thank you, Cassey.
Thank you.
You're welcome, honey. Hang on.